Hello, and welcome back to Charm English Pod. In this episode, I sit down with my sister Stacey and we talk about animal control, her time working in animal control, different interesting facts about animals, animals that are related to each other that you might not have known about. And really, this was a very interesting conversation. Personally, I learned a lot. So I'm sure that you will too. And there is so much vocabulary in this episode. Also, stay tuned until the end of the episode because I play the computer game that Stacey mentions during the episode. So I'll show you a little video of myself playing the Metazooa game at the very end. So, without further ado, here's the episode. Please comment, like, subscribe if you like this kind of content, and I look forward to making more. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Charm English Pod. Today we have a special guest who is my sister, Stacey. If you saw the episode with Emily, that's my older sister. Stacey is my younger sister. So, welcome, Stacey.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Stacey. I'm 26 and I live in DC where Maggie and I grew up.
Nice. Yeah. And tell us a little bit about yourself. Maybe what do you do for work? And also, do you have any hobbies?
Yeah, so right now I work for the American Astronomical Society. That is a nonprofit that's based in DC, really focused on providing resources for people in the astronomy field, whether that be like students and giving them opportunities to travel to go present their research, or they even do things as small as distribute the solar eclipse glasses for some of
Oh,
the astronomical events and everything. So yeah, I do enjoy my job there. And then in my free time, I do pretty much every craft project you could think of. So like sewing with a machine and then hand sewing and crocheting. I've started doing some like watercolor illustration stuff recently. So yeah, just pretty much anything you can buy at a craft store. I own it and it is cluttering up my room.
yeah. I was going to say, you have made me several things while crocheting or knitting. So, Stacey actually made this for me, which is a crocheted headband with flowers on it that was based on a flower crown that I had for my wedding. So, that's one example of one of Stacey's craft projects.
Yeah, and I know this is kind of a universal thing for people who like to make things. I tend to make a lot of stuff for other people and not as many things for myself. So, like, I've been working on the same shirt for myself for, 8 months or something because I just keep on coming up with ideas of like, oh, here's what I could get this person for their birthday, and just like diving really headfirst into those projects. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely a lot of crafts happening at once at our house.
And for watercolors, did you start taking a class? Are you looking at YouTube tutorials or getting inspiration from somewhere specific?
All of those would be really great ideas to go and find people who know what they're doing. I was kind of just testing it out to see if I liked it, and I made a couple of bookmarks to, hold your page in a book. These rectangular ones that I've watercolored on, and then that kind of made the paper kind of bendy, so then I ended up covering it in clear tape to almost laminate it. So that, I mean, they look kind of like definitely like a amateur person made them, but it was just like the first project I've done with the watercolors just to see what it would look like. And I would say my favorite thing to do is a blob of watercolor, and then you can go in with a pen afterwards and draw a
Mm.
flower on top of it or something like that. So you don't have to do really, really precise line work with the watercolor. You can just go in afterwards and like kind of outline whatever you want. So I've been doing that, I think, as like a self-taught technique.
I like that. So make blobs and think afterwards, what does this blob look like? And then add a face or
Yes.
something. Nice.
Yeah, it's like what people do when they are looking at clouds outside and they're trying to figure out what the cloud looks like or what it's in the shape of. I'm doing that, except it's watercolors.
This is crazy. I was thinking the exact same thing. So when you said that, I was also thinking, oh, blobs like the clouds.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and so something that's interesting to me is that you studied when you were in college in Vermont, you studied animal science. And
Mhm.
I feel that that is a really interesting, I don't know, major or career to have. How was your experience studying animal science? And yeah, could you tell us, was there anything cool or interesting? Were you doing dissections? What kind of things are you learning in animal science?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different classes. There's a lot of different things that you would be doing. I started out my freshman year as a biology major, just biology generally, but I was always really interested in macrobiology and evolution and how animals are, not only how we are related to each other, but also how our bodies have kind of been set up to protect us or to reproduce or to attract other, you know, like species and everything. I always think it's really interesting how we've ended up kind of where we are now, whether you're human or a salamander. So
Or
my
both, or a salamander human.
right, right. I don't know who your parents are, right? But yeah, so my college had a animal sciences program, and I really liked the classes, and it was anywhere from our anatomy labs would have like the dissections and everything. Our nutrition labs would have us out measuring out like cow feed. And there were a lot of different labs and stuff that required me to go through silage, which, if you don't know, is fermented hay, kind of like feed for cows. Is a lot of interesting smells and textures on the nutrition side of things. And then one of my other classes that was never really as hands on but was really interesting was zoonotic disease. So, zoonotic diseases are diseases that can be passed back and forth between animals and humans. So, whether that's something that you get, handling animals or taking care of them as a business, or like pretty much any time you would come into contact with animals or even their byproducts, you have to be really careful about what you can get from them and how to safely handle animals and anything that might be related to an animal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it was a really, really robust major. We had a lot of different aspects of the animal handling, animal husbandry, pet handling kind of world.
Yeah, was there anything that you remember learning in a class that really surprised you about a type of animal? Like, was there something that you learned that you thought was, "Wow, I've never thought about that," or "I never realized that about cats," or something like that?
Yeah, there are a couple things that surprised me. There are really common misconceptions about certain animals. Like,
Mm.
have you heard before that, like, a cow has 5 stomachs?
Yeah, people say that to me all the time in class.
Yeah, so they only have 1. The stomach has different chambers, but
Ah, okay.
because they're a ruminating animal has, like, a fermenting stomach, and so they have a bunch of different chambers, and now I wish I had, looked all of this up and studied for it the way that I did on my nutrition exams, but there's a bunch of different types of digesters, and cows are true ruminants, so they have like 5 chambers in their stomach, and the main chamber of their stomach, that is the like ruminating, fermenting chamber of their stomach, always has like a thatch of fibrous material, so like hay or silage or something like on the top, and that stomach is fermenting. But then they also have gastric stomach, so like a stomach like we have with stomach acid and stuff, in a chamber that is next to that chamber. So they have basically a conveyor belt of the food going here and then here and then here and then here, but it's all the same stomach. So
Mm.
there are certain things that we say that are like colloquial terms that are not actually true when it comes down to like the science or the anatomy of it. And one of the other things is, if you were to say whether you thought a raccoon was more related to a dog or a cat, which would you say?
I would say a cat because they have, I don't know, more feline features like pointy
Yeah, they
ears.
look they look like pretty similar, right?
Yeah.
A dog and a cat are actually more related to each other than either one is related to a raccoon. So,
What?
like, there are certain things that just, make sense when you when you think about it for a little bit, or somebody told you that, and then you go into these classes and they show you, well, here on the raccoon's skull is actually where they have this structure and a cat and a dog don't. And so you kind of have to deduce, like, oh, they're actually not that related, even if they look
Mm.
kind of similar.
Were there any 2 animals that are related or more related than you thought that surprised you? Like, "Oh, raccoons are actually really similar to X animal."
Yes. So there are ungulates on every continent except for Australia. Ungulates are animals with hooves. It's just the general term for any animal that has hoofs instead of feet or paws or anything. And that includes like deer, pigs, also hippos, like a lot of things that started out with hooves that then became other structures. And so the only continent that doesn't have any that are native is Australia, because Australia had left Pangea and the land mass of Australia had already separated. But in every other continent, pretty much they have like some sort of native deer or native ungulate, which is like, an elk or a deer or a moose there are all of those different horned deer also that are in the plains region of Africa, like gazelles and things like that.
Mm.
And so the ungulates are really interesting to me because you can find them pretty much anywhere. Any pig, any deer, I guarantee, if it's got a hoof, they're related, which is really interesting to think about because that is a type of animal that has been, pretty prolific in every single continent that has people living on it except Australia. And they're all related to the same common ancestors.
That's really interesting. Also, to just think about the fact that pigs and deer are part of this same category of
Hmm.
animals when they're so different when you look at them. That's
Yes,
really
yes.
strange. Yeah.
Yeah, the genetic family tree is like actually like I that's something I'm super super interested in. How is everything related and connected? And there's actually a mobile game on it doesn't have to be mobile. It's a web browser game that is called Metazooa, and every day they pick a different animal and you make guesses as to what animal you think it will be. And every time you get a hint as to whether or not you're in the same category or in the same area. So if the animal of the day was fish and you guessed, monkey, it would tell you, okay, well, the common thing here is that they both have like spinal cords, like they're both vertebrates. And then it might give you later on that it's not a mammal or it's not in the mammalian class of vertebrates. And so then you get closer and closer to finally guessing what this animal is. And I think you have like 21 guesses. One time I used every guess, and on the last one I got it, and the answer was mosquito.
But that's yeah, because I guess I don't even consider insects when it is if someone were to ask me what's your favorite animal or something like that, I an insect wouldn't even occur to me as being part of the category of animals, but I suppose
Yeah.
they are.
Yeah. And I think you'd be hard pressed also to find someone who would say that their favorite insect even would be a mosquito.
Mosquito. I
They're
think that
pretty
would be like a
universally hated.
yeah, someone that's, like, controversial, likes to be controversial. I actually love
Yes.
mosquitoes. I was also thinking, I mean, this is maybe a stretch, just relating it back to languages. I feel that
Mhm.
kind of reminds me of language families and how weird it is to think of the Indo-European language group and how actually Hindi and there are languages like Soviet languages, Germanic languages, Romance languages that are all related to each other and actually more similar than Finnish or than Basque or languages that are closer together that have less to do with each
Mm.
other than languages that are so far apart. It's very bizarre to think
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. I do think that that's a really good analogy or like a really good connection. And I will also say sometimes with language surrounding animals, specifically like the naming of animals, you have, the Latin name that people come up with, but a lot of the times the Latin name or the official name for the animal will be a, a word from whatever the group is that's nearby, because, who has a name for this animal. And at the time that a lot of these animals were rediscovered, I want to say, by European settlers in some places, especially when you're talking about the US, the people who can tell you about these animals are the people who are probably already there. And so a lot of the naming for animals, specifically in the US and Vermont, like where I was studying and where I was an animal control officer and everything, the names for the animals have always been really interesting to me, like how they got to those names and everything. And even just what you colloquially will call the animals, because the mountain lion in the US is mountain lion, and then there's the catamount, which is the like mountain lion and the mountain lion name that is like in Vermont. And so the
Mm.
local catamount has been extinct, but there are other mountain lions like nearby that are also called different things. So it is very interesting to, I guess, not only have the identity of the animal be a certain thing, but then what everyone calls it might differ, even if it is the same animal.
Yeah, definitely. And I've also gotten that question before because people in Chile, there are pumas, and
Hmm.
people will ask me how to say puma in English. And puma is an English word too, but when I've searched it, there's also mountain lion and several
Yeah.
different names for the same animal. Is that kind of also depending on who you're asking, like which region the
Yes.
pumas are
So
living in?
we have, basic the smaller end of big cats. So big cats is like tigers and lions and stuff. So you've got like mountain lions, pumas, panthers. They're kind of on the smaller side. And so those kind of smaller big cats are apex predators in North and South America. And what's really interesting is almost every different location that has these animals, they are called something different. And even if you're looking at if you're looking at the exact same species, the exact same subspecies, in some areas of the US, I know they are called mountain lions versus catamounts versus pumas versus, there's like a lot of different names for the same exact species. Like the DNA would match up exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. That happens that way. I guess it's in that case good to go off of the Latin name to say, is it the same thing that we're talking about?
Right, right. Is it the same thing? The other thing that I think is really interesting about this too is like, so there's goose and then there's geese as the plural, and then there's moose, but it's not meese.
I
Multiple
always want
moose
to say
is just
me.
still moose. I always want to say meese. And it's because moose is actually entered the English language much later. Moose is actually a native word, so it is a Native American word where we went to people who were here and were like, hey, what is that huge thing over there?
They're like,
And we took
the
their
moose?
word. Yes, we took their word, which is moose, which is why it doesn't, what do you call it when you take it from single to plural? Is it like decline or something?
Yeah,
Yes, yeah, it doesn't decline the same as geese, even though it should in a lot of people's minds because it sounds the same. It doesn't decline the same.
a lot of people will ask me about so many irregular words in English, but there are just so many because of, like you said, this animal was, while we were still using the same grammar structure, this word entered the language. And after the fact, we adopted this word, or like, I don't know, the animal chinchilla, I didn't
Hmm.
realize was actually chinchilla, that we just copied the Spanish name. And I was like,
Yeah,
I was hearing Jorge was saying chinchilla, and I was like, chinchilla? What's the, or llama? Like we just copied words from
yeah,
Spanish speakers, or well, probably the indigenous
yeah,
people. But it's kind of just shows how, as a society, our evolution is so not organized. It's very human and very much adopting different things at different times and based on
yes,
whatever
yeah,
was going on. That's
yes,
the word.
Yes, and there were certainly scientists at the time who were like, this is our like proper Latin word for this and all that. But like there's a reason that moose is still moose. Like, it was named by the people who were here. And the moose around them knew how it behaved, basically knew everything about the animals that they were around. So I feel like I don't know, it kind of makes me feel good when we keep the original name
Mm.
because it's not really our right to come in and say, okay, well, chinchilla sounds fine or whatever, but I'm actually going to call that guy Puffball now and just move on to something totally different.
Although I will
So
say, if you had your own personal chinchilla, Puffball would be a good would be a good
that
name.
would be so cute.
Cute. Um, you kind of mentioned this, and I feel like it is also another really interesting thing that people might not be aware of because I don't know how it works in different countries, but you worked as an animal control officer. Could you explain a little bit what that is? Just because, yeah, I'm not sure how it works in different places, but how did it work in Vermont or in the US?
The interesting thing that I discovered in animal control was that it actually is completely inconsistent within the US as well. So I
Okay.
can kind of explain what I did, and perhaps other countries would have people with these jobs that would somehow fall on this like spectrum. So I was an animal control officer in Vermont. I was responsible for South Burlington and Essex. So these are two towns that are, medium large towns for Vermont. But in Vermont, keep in mind, there are not a ton of people in Vermont. And so therefore, there's not a ton of funding for animal control services. So the way that it's set up in Vermont is that each individual town has to contract an animal control officer. The town, normally the police department, will create a contract and have an animal control officer sign on, and they have to supply their own van, they have to supply their own supplies, and then you kind of make relationships with the shelters and with the police officers and with the citizens so that they entrust animals to you. My scope was a little bit bigger because I was working for it was a company, but it was just my boss and me. So it's as small as a company could possibly be and have an employee. And so what we would do is we would be in charge of any of the domestic pets and a lot of the smaller wildlife in the towns that we were in charge of. And what that looks like is that you're enforcing the state laws and the federal laws and also city ordinance. The only things that are really going to be federal laws that you would really have to enforce are uh, animal cruelty laws and like dog fighting, cockfighting, the animal cruelty laws that we have gotten on the books as federal laws are normally just like the really serious
Mm.
cruelty crimes. And then your state laws are anything from like neglect, not having enough water, to I think on the books as a state law in Vermont is not having like a dog in a hot car or something like that. And then your city laws are going to be smaller things. So, like, are there dogs allowed in the parks in your city? And are those dogs in the parks allowed to be off leash in your city? And with a lot of the more rural places in Vermont, there were way fewer laws on the books because they didn't really have as many people. They don't really need to have as many regulations. So I would get calls from people in like Jericho, which is a town in Vermont with like 30,000 people. I mean, it's like pretty small for the amount of land that it covers. And they would be asking about leash laws. And I was like, well, do you have a city council? Do you have anyone that would have made a leash law? Because if you're looking for a state leash law, that's not a thing. It like is down to the city. And another thing the state has on the books for a law is dog or animal bites, and how to deal with those. So if an animal, a dog, a cat, pretty much any animal that can carry rabies is the main concern. If they bite you, you would have to contact the health officer, contact the animal control officer, you know, watch the dog for 10 days. There's this like whole process, and that's also on the state level. So what my day to day as an animal control officer looked like, I would either be responding to calls or I would be going out on patrol to kind of proactively go out and see, are the leash laws in the park being obeyed? There are these certain areas in the city that people had complained about having like barking dogs or dogs off leash or something like that. So they would call us and have us like go by.
I was thinking of also asking how to deal with a dog that's biting people, for example.
Mhm.
Is there kind of something, as someone that studied animals and then went into this job where people are kind of, yeah, in animal welfare deciding what's best to do? Do you have thoughts about laws like that, about how to best deal with a dog that's biting people? Is it something where really you should put the dog down? Um, by the way, if you're listening, this is a phrasal verb. To put a dog down means to euthanize the dog, basically to kill the dog if it is a danger or if the dog is in
Yeah.
pain. You could also put a dog down if it's experiencing like a medical problem. But yeah, what would you say related to that?
Yeah, I want to say also the other colloquial term that I hear a lot too is to put a dog to sleep.
Oh yeah.
That's
That's it.
like that's
Yeah,
something we
exactly.
yeah, that's something that we like heard like a lot. But I have some opinions on animal euthanasia that I think are really common opinions with people who work in animal care, animal sheltering, animal control, and I know they are controversial on a wider scale, but for people who work day to day with these animals, there are some situations in which an animal does not really have quality of life if their entire existence as a domesticated animal relies on them having interactions with people. Like a dog is not a wolf, right? They can't go out and necessarily like hunt for food on their own. And we do have obligations as people, especially in Vermont. Again, one of the laws on the books is that it is an animal cruelty violation to not provide veterinary care.
Mm,
So you can't just release your dog into the wild or anything like that. So that being said, if you have to have contact with this animal, the animal will not stop biting people. The animal is extremely aggressive towards people. In some situations, it's really out of fear of everyone. And that's actually in most situations. But in a situation where nobody can get close to an animal that requires human care in order to survive, and the animal has extreme stress every time somebody gets close, is it fair to that animal to keep them alive, knowing that their entire existence is this stress cycle of feeling like the only thing you can do to protect yourself is to wildly attack whoever comes near you?
mm,
People like to say kill shelters or no kill shelters, meaning that you do euthanize or you do not euthanize. The thing that I think we need to keep in mind when talking about animal euthanasia, especially in the US, is that there are high volume and low volume shelters. High volume shelters are normally in the south of the US, and they're doing the best they can to get all of the stray dogs, stray cats, all of these animals that really need help and giving them homes. And one thing that's really common are these transports of animals from the south to the north. So in Vermont, for example, we would get most of our shelter dogs from these transports of animals from, shelters in Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, like any of these southern states that are just absolutely flooded with
mm,
animals. Whereas in the north, we don't really have as many strays. We don't really have all of this happening. Um, and they'll just send them up north so that they will get adopted up there as opposed to having to euthanize for length of stay. And that is something that people really have a hard time with. The fact that sometimes vet care or even compassionate vet care can mean that you are euthanizing animals, but we don't really have a different system in place right now for that to not be at some points like the more merciful, the better option. Because especially some dogs, I mean, they'll get stress in the shelter, and then imagine that stress, every day for 3 years. Is it correct for you to be euthanized at that point? Is it incorrect? So I do think at the end of the day, we just need to have a lot more compassion for the people who work at these shelters. Because if anyone doesn't want these animals to be euthanized for no reason, it's the people who have chosen to work there every day.
It's interesting because I know that there's not a perfect system for sure, but comparing different countries in Chile and other Latin American countries, there are a lot of stray animals. And so
Mhm.
I do think in Chile, I always think that the stray dogs, from my perception, obviously I can't communicate with them, seem like they have a happier life than some people's domesticated dogs because they kind of wander around, people feed them, they sleep on the street, they look chunky and well fed in in a lot of cases. Like, I mean, sometimes you see like a scrawny dog that looks like it's not doing well, but I would say a lot of the dogs close to me, you see the dogs behind people's fences that are really tortured and upset because they can't go outside and be free, and then you see the street dogs kind of prancing around all happy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if there's a perfect system, but do you have any thoughts about countries that have more stray animals versus the system that we have in the US of trying to get the animals off the street?
Yes, and my thoughts are almost 100% not about the actual animal system itself. The big question that needs to be answered is whether or not people are taking care of those animals. If people
Mm,
are taking care of those animals aren't getting really injured, they're not really sick. There are a lot of places where that is the system and that works. I think in the US, the problem that we have is that vet care is extremely expensive. So, for you to care for not only your own pet, but also to take an animal in off the street and go and get that animal vet care because you notice that they have, some issue or you think they might not be spayed or neutered or something. There are obviously, especially working with shelters, there are programs to give these animals care and to TNR cats, so trap, neuter, release. That's like something we do in the US for stray cats.
and
It's
neuter,
technically,
that's like for male or female cats. I forget which one. Neuter and spayed. One is for male cats.
yes, yeah. So,
Neuter male cats. Yeah. Okay.
yes, yes. So getting neutered or spayed is like either removing or cutting a certain part of the reproductive organ so that the animals can't reproduce. Neutering is for males and spaying is for females.
Mm,
And that is the same term for dogs or cats. The trap neuter release is for stray, but specifically feral cats. So in situations where a cat is not going to be able to ever be in a home because it didn't grow up around people and it's really afraid of people and it is in like the wilderness in Vermont, we would do trap neuter release. And that is also controversial. I could probably spend 5 hours talking about trap neuter release versus euthanasia versus relocation. There's a lot of different thoughts about whether or not cats should actually be allowed to go back out because they are an invasive species, but they are also a domesticated animal that is our responsibility to take care of. And in some situations in Vermont, there's also what's called like a sink effect. So if you have like a feral cat colony and you get rid of it, then you have another feral cat colony or another animal that will fill that niche and they'll just come right in to that area.
mm,
And so at least if you trap and neuter and spay all the cats and then re-release them, they're maintaining that area, like that's their turf, but they can't have any more kittens. And so I think
yes.
a lot of what we were doing in Vermont was like in the moment damage control in an area that does not have like Hawaii, for example, has cats, and that's way bigger of a problem because Hawaii, the cats are invasive, and a lot of the native species to Hawaii did not evolve to have a predator like a cat. So they have a
Mm,
lot of bird species in Hawaii that are native to Hawaii, and a lot of, like, some of them it's their only territory is Hawaii. And they are ground nesting birds because they never needed to learn how to put their nest in a tree because they never had cats. And then all of a
Mm,
sudden we brought cats. And, you know, do you try and save all these cats and TNR all these cats because you don't want to euthanize all of them? Or do you try and save this bird population that is likely the only population of these birds that has been native to this place? And before we brought cats over, they didn't have any predators. So there are
yeah.
areas where it gets really heated on either side of the debate.
I had another question that I wanted to ask about your experience in animal control, which is what are some of the crazy situations that you experienced while working in animal control? Did you see any crazy moose situation, crazy raccoon situation? What were some of the highlights, or maybe not highlights, of what you saw?
So our main, I want to say purview, our main area of expertise as animal control officers was domesticated animals and smaller wild animals. Anything bigger, so like the deer or the bears or the moose, would go to the game wardens
The
in
game
Vermont.
wardens! Is that a
In Ver-
real, like, every state has game wardens?
Most of them, yes, that's like a state by state thing. And in our state, they covered what was really interesting is that they covered wild game animals. So, like these really big animals like moose and all this stuff. They also covered fishing and like waterways. And then they also were the people that you had to talk to when it came to exotic animals. And so some people, would be in trouble for some reason or another. We would go to their house, they would have, turtles or snakes or whatever that they got off of Facebook Marketplace, or they imported them, or from a shady pet store or something like that. And some of these exotic animals, and exotic just means not native in this context, some of these exotic animals were illegal to have. And so then the game wardens would have to seize them, and so the game wardens would go in thinking that they were just talking to this person about, the weird stuff that's been happening on their property, or, we've been hearing animal noises or something. And then the person would have all these like exotic pets, and now the game wardens have a 15-foot python that they're just in charge of. And so talking to some of the guys at the like they were very nice. They were the kind of people who were like dreaming of the day where they get to deal with the 10-foot python,
That would
which
be
was
my
I was
nightmare,
not expecting.
not
Yes, I
my
was
dream.
not expecting.
That would be my nightmare.
Yeah. So in terms of my most interesting or my best stories, we would deal with some wild animals like raccoons and foxes and squirrels, like anything kind of smaller like that, and then pretty much any domesticated animal. And so in Vermont, as most places in America as well, the two main domesticated animals are going to be dogs and cats. So I want to say like probably 80% of what I worked on was dogs and cats. But because there are at shelters, they'll call them smallies, uh, smaller domesticated animals that kind of don't really have like their own category. So that's like your guinea pigs and
Mm,
rats
like
and
hamsters.
yes, and it's illegal to own sugar gliders. Sugar gliders are native to Australia, Indonesia, and New Guinea, and they're a marsupial. And another just fun fact, I guess, is that so marsupials are a group of mammals who are all united in the fact that they give birth to their young like quite small, and then they have a pouch, so like the kangaroo pouch that like
Mhm.
the kangaroo Joey sits in, the little babies will crawl up into the pouch, and then that's where the mom's nipples are, and so they will like breastfeed inside of the pouch. So they go from being these like really little beans into being like a baby kangaroo in the pouch. And
Oh.
so yes, so marsupials are all kind of like united by their reproductive path, I guess. The only marsupial in the US is the possum.
Possums have pouches?
Yes. Yeah, possums have pouches, and then once the babies get a little bit bigger, they all will hitch a ride on their mom's back. And so a possum will be walking through the forest and it'll have all these babies on her back. And sometimes a mom possum who's really tired will have like 8 possums on her back. And she'll be walking around and one of the possums will let go. And so then, you've got a baby possum and her mom doesn't know where she is because she let go. And so I want to say 5 separate times while I was in animal control, we were also assisting rehabbing a possum. That was a little baby possum that had gotten separated from its mom. And so you just have to feed them and take care of them until they're big enough to be re-released. So,
Possum rehab.
yes.
That's so funny. Uh, um, what were you were gonna say something about sugar. You were saying the smallies and the sugar gliders are part of the
Yes.
smallies.
Yes, a lot of the smallies, I mean, a sugar glider, I wouldn't take a sugar glider to a normal vet, to be honest with you. But a lot of the rats and the smaller, like, animals from the US that were mammals, they were a little bit easier to care for, and the veterinarian that was at the Humane Society had a little more experience with them. So those wouldn't go to the game warden, they would go to us. And one of the things that happened a couple of times in the time that I was an animal control officer is that folks will get this idea that, you know, I can't care for this animal anymore. I can't, provide for this animal anymore. So I should re release it into the wild. The problem with that is that if you're talking about a domesticated pet, they need you to take care of them. And if you're talking about an exotic pet that is like a wild animal that you're keeping that's not domesticated, is that they are not from that area. This might not even be their natural habitat. And on top of that, if they do fit into this ecological niche, if the temperature in Vermont, if the weather in Vermont is something they could survive in, they could go into our forests and completely take over. And all of a sudden, we have this invasive species that's like super, super big. Do you know how they say that there are like pythons, like really big snakes in the Florida Everglades, like in the swamps in Florida?
Yeah.
Apparently, that started because there was a snake breeding facility, and during a hurricane a little while ago, it was like I think 20 years ago or something, during a hurricane, that building was blown away, and like all of the snakes that were in that building were then blown into the Everglades. And so it wasn't just individual person by person, like, oh, I can't care for my animal anymore, I'm just going to re release them kind of thing. This facility got hit, and all of the snakes were in the Everglades. And so now, as we go into the Florida Everglades, there are people who are finding these like 20-foot long pythons, and it's because they all escaped from the same facility. And
That's
they
terrifying.
technically,
Oh my god.
yes, and like anacondas and stuff like that, like they technically fit into this niche because it is kind of like a swampy area. They fit into the wildlife like extremely well. And then you've got this problem where they're just like completely, you know, nobody's prepared for them, right? It's like the birds
Yeah.
in Hawaii. Like you didn't evolve to have this kind of predator. And so you're just completely, completely surprised as a native species in those areas. Yeah. So it is a little bit of a concern for animal control, and not only from an animal welfare point of view of like taking care of the animal, making sure the animal won't die like when exposed to elements on its own, but also making sure that our waterways and forests and everything don't have these animals in them that are completely taking over native wildlife. And so people re-releasing their pets into the wild is like a really big problem. People should not do that. Like that would be past the last resort for me.
Mm.
And so we got a call one day that there was a wild chinchilla roaming the streets of Essex, Vermont.
That just sounds so cute.
It sounds cute, right? But there's no such thing as a wild chinchilla in Vermont. Chinchillas are native to the Andes Mountains. They are not at all native to not only any place in the US, but specifically Vermont, which is like so north in the US that it would be like a 30-minute drive from where I live to the Canada border. Like
Mm.
I was we were very, very far north. The winters are extremely cold and extremely wet. And so this is not, chinchillas cannot get wet. They have a lot of hair per follicle. They take, in the wild, they'll take like dust baths, and they have other ways of keeping clean, but they cannot get wet because it's really easy for them to get hypothermia because their fur will never dry.
They
And
take
so
dust baths. Oh my god.
yeah, you've released like this little fluffy guy out into the, streets of Vermont where in the summer it's like damp and then in the winter it's cold and damp. So there's really no way that this chinchilla would have like done well out there in the wild. And so we had to go and pick the chinchilla up and bring it to the shelter. And it was one of the smallies there. And they have these, general rules for animals like that, like chinchillas, where they really, really want you to have had some kind of previous experience with one of these animals, like a chinchilla or any of these smallies that they end up having to adopt out because they do have such specific care. And people always assume that an animal being smaller means that it'll be easier to care for. Like a big dog is a lot of work, right? But with a chinchilla or a rabbit, there are very specific things that they can and can't eat, that you can and can't put in their enclosure. There's a lot of research you have to do into these animals. So, one of the things that people put into their enclosures a lot of times is something for them to take a dust bath. So, you have to really know how the animal acts in the wild and everything.
Yeah,
And someone just, released the animal into the streets of Vermont,
that's so
which
terrible.
is, I was not expecting someone to call me and say there was a chinchilla on the loose. And as someone who has been doing this job for like a while at this point, I was really honestly prepared to go out and have it be a squirrel that somebody misidentified as a chinchilla. Because we would sometimes get calls where people would be like, there's a bobcat in my yard. And they would send me a photo, and it was like a tabby cat. It was like a
It
house
was
cat
just
that was
someone's
just
cat.
kind of
Yeah,
stripy looking. Yes. So I
that's
was
so
really
funny.
not expecting it to be a chinchilla. I thought this person was just completely misidentifying the animal.
Yeah, and I guess I imagine that's a crime, right? To just release chinchillas randomly?
Yeah, I mean you can't release an animal. There's a lot of different animal cruelty statutes that you're like not abiding by if you're just releasing an animal. But
Yeah.
there's also laws in a lot of places that you can't let an animal roam at large. So like if you're a criminal that's at large, right? You're on the FBI most wanted list and it's like, "Oh, he's still at large." It's like they're still looking for you. So we would have laws in Vermont that are roaming at large, meaning like a dog or a cat that you're allowing to roam off leash that nobody can catch, that you don't have control over.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, it's not only violating the animal cruelty laws, it's also violating the just basic laws of not having your pet be off leash in public spaces. But of course, in situations like this, we don't really focus as much on who did this and where are they, and there's not really any way to tell in some of these cases. What we normally try and focus on is like what is the best outcome from here on out
Mm.
for the animal that we now have in our custody.
Yeah, and did you have another story about your time in animal control?
Yes, I have a lot of them. There are a couple that I keep in my back pocket though for, if somebody asks me, "Oh, what's the cutest thing you've ever seen?" or "What's the best thing you've ever seen?" because I do think that those stories are like worth celebrating, just considering how many serious topics you also have to cover with animal control. But one of my favorite stories from working there, I worked there for probably 5 years. So this was in like one town. And so this was my favorite of like all time. So we got a call in Essex that someone found a cat that was like roaming around, and it didn't look like the cat had any tags on it or anything. Like nobody owned the cat. And so we were asked to go and pick it up. So we go and pick up this cat. It is a black cat with a white little spot right here.
Mhm.
And it's got these really big, like really yellow eyes. And so this cat is like really, really cute. So we put this cat on Facebook. This is like one of the things that you have to do when you first get a stray animal is try and post it as many places as possible to make it so that if the owner sees the picture, they can go, "Oh my gosh, they have my cat," and like reach out to you. So we would post not only like posters of the cat, like at City Hall and stuff, but we would also post it on our Facebook page and on the city's Facebook page and stuff like that. So we posted pictures of this cat and we were like, hey, is anyone missing this black cat? Super friendly, found around this area. This woman contacts us almost immediately. She calls me, she's like crying on the phone. She's like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. My cat didn't come home for like 2 days and I thought that he was a goner. Like, I'm so happy you have him. I'll come pick him up right away. So she comes and picks up the cat. She's super excited that she was reunited with the cat. This has happened, by the way, a million times. Someone has missed their cat or their dog. They got out of a fence, they got out of a door. I don't think any more of it because this is something that happens all the time. The woman calls me the next day and asks if she should come back in with the cat or without the cat to explain something to me. And I was like, what are you talking about? I mean, you can bring the cat back in if you want, but like, what are you talking about? So she brings the cat back in and she says, I'm so sorry, but look at what happened last night. And she shows me a picture on her phone, and it is the cat that I gave back to her that she identified as 100% her cat. The big yellow eyes, the little white spot on the black cat sitting right next to her. And then right on the outside of the door is another cat that looks the exact same. So she came back and she was like, I can't tell whether or not the one that you gave me is my cat. Because I think the one outside is my cat because he knew to come to my door. But the one that you gave me is so friendly that now I am really. Do you have any way that you can tell? Because this cat did not have any kind of identification, no microchip, like no nothing. No
No
identifying
collar?
scars, no collar, no identifying scars, like nothing. She was like, is there any way that you can tell which one is my cat? And I said, scientifically, like, no. Like, one of them is your cat and one of them is like your cat's twin, I guess. And so she was really torn up and she was like, I don't know what to do. And I was like, well, we can talk to the Humane Society. Because if it's not your cat, you will have to adopt the second cat. Just sign a piece of paper basically that says, I'm taking over ownership of this cat. Animal control gave me this cat and it is now mine. Because you have the adoption paperwork, obviously, for your original cat, but you need new paperwork if you have cat number two. We're going to assume it's not your cat. And so basically, to be able to rest assured at night that she really has her cat, she adopted this second cat. And to this day, she has two cats and she does not know which one was her original cat.
Are they and they're both, like, the same sex? Like, they're both male cats or something?
And they're not only the same, like the same sex and then the same exact like coloring and everything, but also they were found, the one cat was found like 2 blocks or something away from this woman's house. And then the other cat came to the door. They both were also in the neighborhood.
I feel like they're long lost brothers or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and, cats, the way that their, coloring works, like, tuxedo cats and stuff, they'll have, like, the dark back and then the light bottom. It's because cats, the way that their color develops in utero is that the color goes from their spine down. So there are some cats that are like all black or, all orange or something. And then there are some cats where it reaches like halfway down their back. There are some cats where it reaches like all the way to their legs, but it always kind of does that. And so one thing that's really common is that you have just like a little spot right here or something where the color has come down but just has not like closed all the way across their chest or something like that. So having like a white chest on a cat is pretty common, and so the problem with having a lot of cats have the same exact fur pattern and everything, and with the tabby cats having a lot of the same lines around their eyes and everything, is that if you don't have any kind of microchip on your animal or collar or some kind of identifying something, I guarantee you there's a doppelganger out there for them somewhere. They have a twin somewhere.
That kind of leads to I was going to ask you if you have any tips for pet owners. So, for example, would you say microchipping or having some tracker is an important thing for pet owners to do? Like, would you recommend that people do that?
I think that that would be extremely helpful. If you have an indoor animal, you probably don't think about your animal getting out very often or anything like that. They have microchips, at least in the US, like the system is pretty standard. You'll have a microchip kind of inserted under your skin here as the dog or cat. You have a microchip inserted here, and then anyone who finds you in the future, we have these scanners that you just like wave over the animal and it will come up with a microchip number. And you can, when you adopt your pet, a lot of times they come with a microchip. You have to make sure that the microchip is registered like the day you get the animal. In your hype, in your, joy of getting a new animal, you have to make sure that the microchip that is in your dog or cat, you go onto their website or you call them and you give them your name and phone number. Because what will happen sometimes is that animals will enter the shelter system already microchipped, whether it be because their owner passed away or their owner had to give them up for adoption or something like that. And then the person that we're calling as animal control, once we've scanned the microchip, is the previous person who owns the
Yeah,
animal.
not the current
So,
owner. Yeah.
yes. So I would say having a microchip, if that is available where you are, and then also making sure that the information on the microchip is as current as possible. And one thing that I think is kind of a weird trick, or like a weird piece of advice, but I guess comes from me owning my cat and just knowing that this has made my life easier, is really seeing what you can train them to do, not only for their, entertainment or enrichment, but also for your own peace of mind. If you can train your cat to come even to the sound of you shaking a treat bag, if your cat accidentally gets out past you out the door, don't chase after your cat, don't run after your dog. They're going to think it's a game. They're going to think that you're, coming to get them. But if
Mm.
you can get them to respond to a treat, you can get them back in the house. And the same with, cutting nails or brushing teeth, like these personal care things you're supposed to do for your pets, making sure that they have a positive experience where they're getting treats or they're getting something that they like when these things happen. Make it really easy for you to do it yourself, and just having the peace of mind that your pet feels like safe when you're with them, when you're touching their paws, when you're doing all this stuff and kind of desensitizing them to you, makes it so that if they're ever in danger, if they ever get out, if they ever need help, you already have all of the systems in place to help them and you don't really have to worry about any of that.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense because you never can predict when something might happen. So I think your baby being lost on the street and not being trained to know how to deal with that is kind of scary.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you say, do you have any other tips for pet owners in general? I think a lot of people are pet owners. A lot of
Yeah.
people
I
are
mean,
pet
I
owners these days.
I have a lot of tips. It really depends on the situation.
Yeah.
One of the main things that I will say about dogs is research the breed of dog you're going to get before you get them. There are a lot of dogs like corgis that are really common, really, really cute, like pets. But corgis are also herding dogs. And so a herding dog, like any kind of like border collie or like a corgi or anything like that, cattle dogs. Also, I've seen one of the most high energy dogs that I ever met was a cattle dog border collie mix. And that dog was just all energy all the time, like really hyped up. So those dogs need not only a lot of enrichment, but also will try and herd you sometime.
Mm,
So like a corgi, especially if you have kids, a corgi will go around and nip everybody like on the ankles and stuff to try and get them to kind of go closer together. There are certain, even if your dog has never met an animal that it should be herding, there are certain things we've bred these dogs for, especially when you're getting a purebred dog,
mm.
that you really need to look into before you know, say yes to this dog, or you really need to make sure that you and that dog can kind of live the same lifestyle and to make sure the dog has enough enrichment. And one of the main ways to do that for dogs or cats, if you think your pet might be a little bit bored, is using anything related to scent. They spend a lot of their hunting abilities. The way their hunting abilities have developed basically is a lot of it depends on scent,
Mm,
which means that it fires up a lot of brain activity for them. So while you could take your dog on like a 5 mile run every day, you can also make them like hunt for treats. The cheapest, easiest way that I've found to do this is I had a delivery box from an online delivery and it comes with that brown packing paper. And I just like will scrunch that up or scrunch newspaper up and put it in the box and then drop treats in there. And then the cat has to go through and hunt for the treats,
mm.
and then that's using a lot of their brain. And so, after you have like a language lesson or something where you're using your whole brain afterwards, you feel kind of like, okay, like, oh, we
Mm.
did that, like we're a little bit more tired now. You can kind of do the same thing with your pet so that your animal that seems like they really need a lot of enrichment is getting that in more ways than just physical exercise.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think we often don't realize that we are also animals, and so a lot of the needs that we have as humans, like social
Yeah.
needs, sleep, intellectual needs, we share, I think, across
Yeah.
species.
Yeah, and learning about veterinary care is like so interesting as a person because I would always, if an animal came in and they were kind of lethargic, I would be able to be like, okay, this animal might be dehydrated. When's the last time that they ate? Like doing a full rundown of this animal. Meanwhile, if I'm tired in the middle of the day, I'll be
It's a
like, oh,
big
I should go get another. It's a big mystery, or I should go get another cup of coffee. When it's a dog, when it's a cat, I know they probably need some water and maybe a snack. And if that doesn't work, maybe a nap. But when it's me, I'm like, who could say?
we have no clue what's going on here.
No clue.
Okay, I wanted to ask you a couple more questions that are a little bit in a different direction, like not really
Hmm.
related to anything. So, one
Yeah.
is what are some recommendations that you have of books, TV series, something you've read or watched recently that you think people might enjoy?
Well, so there is a TV show called Animal Control
Okay.
where if you want to see somebody live action, catching an animal and the kind of calls that people get, that show is very funny. It's kind of a fantastical, version of it. It's a definitely an exaggerated kind of version of like what types of animals would be on the loose, but it really does capture the true essence of animal control, which is that on any given day going into work, you have no idea what you're going to end up doing or
Mm,
what animal you're going to end up working with. And
yeah.
that one too is a really good depiction of in Vermont, I was talking about like city by city, they kind of contract out different animal control officers. In other places, the state has a whole department that is the animal control department. And so I think that that show is a really good depiction of like, a place that has an established department where they run the shelter through animal control.
Yeah, so that sounds interesting, and I feel like people would get a lot of interesting vocabulary from watching a show like that as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. And I was also going to ask, and you can tell me if you don't have an answer for this, but what is a phrase or expression in English that you like that you want to share with people?
Yes. Yes. So I was just thinking about this earlier. There are a lot of phrases, obviously, in the US that are like specific to the US, but the ones that I really, really like, that I really get a kick out of, are the like Southern expressions. And, mom grew up in South Louisiana, so like very, very Southern.
Mhm.
And I remember this still makes me laugh now, and it also is animal related. When I first was learning how to drive, I was always very nervous behind the wheel, so this was not I was not really doing my best driving effort that I have now. But
Mhm.
when I was first learning how to drive, when I was like 16 or 17, my mom took me out to drive. And we got back, and dad was like, how did it go? How was driving? And to say that she felt anxiety, mom said, I felt more nervous than a long tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs.
I've never heard that.
I guess the cat's tail would be stuck on the rocking
Would be
chairs. I
stuck
don't
under
know.
some rocking chair, yeah.
But
That's so
it
funny.
also made me laugh at the time because I was like, I didn't think that I had freaked her out that bad, but I freaked her out so bad the Southern expression started coming
But
out.
yeah, she started to get I feel like whenever people start to get, like, emotionally activated, that's when the expressions start coming.
Yes, yeah.
Nice, that's a good one. I always think of one that mom and dad would use a lot was, like, "It's a toad strangler," talking about it raining a lot.
Hmm.
That was a classic
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, and there are so many that have so many curse words and very visual imagery,
I
and
was gonna say
there are a lot of ones that are inappropriate that I'm sure you and I are both thinking of.
I think I can say this one. It's as cold as a witch's tit in a brass brazier.
Mhm.
That's I feel like that's not I mean, it's pretty graphic and visual, but not as bad as some
It's
of the
this
others, maybe.
I think it's the same level or a little better than the other one. So if anyone is doing research into like, oh, what are the other like southern phrases?
Southern
Just
phrases.
a warning that there's going to be some very visual imagery on some of these.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of creativity there.
Yes.
I also wanted to ask, do you have any advice that you would give to people learning English?
As a native English speaker, if it doesn't make sense, it's because English doesn't make sense. And don't give up if it seems like you I would say don't give up if it seems like you are having a hard time because the way that you're going to remember something is by making those mistakes. And also don't be afraid to take up space. English, there's a lot of people who speak English, and if somebody gets mad at you for trying to practice your English with them, you go find somebody else to practice English with, because I feel like just one of the things that was really a barrier for me a lot of the time with language learning was, am I going to make a fool of myself? Am I going to get this thing wrong? Am I going to make this person think that I don't know what I'm talking about? I would get a lot of stage fright and get in my head about a lot of that stuff. And every time I've put myself out there, I have felt like that was really worth it. I would say just don't be afraid to put yourself out there and find your group of people that, maybe are interested in the same things as you. And yeah, I really think that anyone can learn a language as long as they are willing to be a little bit embarrassed by themselves sometimes.
That's true. I agree. I feel like it's helpful to be your own biggest supporter. Like, as long as you're not bullying yourself, no one else can bully you.
Yeah. Yeah, and your only goal should be to be better than you were, a year ago or something. Like your only goal should be to uh, make yourself proud with like the progress you've come through, and not to really worry about what other people are doing or I don't know how fast they're learning or anything like that.
Yeah. Baby steps, baby steps. Okay. Do you have any final thoughts? Anything else you wanted to add based on our conversation today? Conclusion? I think a lot of people are going to take from this like what is animal control? How does animal control work? How does one work with animals? What are
Yeah.
some interesting things to know about animals?
Yeah, I would say just the through line for all of this to me is that what animal control is and what that job is defined by really depends on where you are, not only in what country, but a lot of times in the US, even what city or what block you're on. I mean, uh, in your community, how does that work? And if you are someone who's passionate about animals, I think that just approaching everything curiously and seeing, how does it work here and where could we possibly enact change to make things better?
Mm.
I think that that's really, I really love it when people, approach these situations in like a really curious way. Because maybe the way that we're doing things now is not the best way that we should be doing things. But
That's
in the
true.
meantime, we got to show up for who's there and who's doing the work right now. So, yeah.
Nice. I like that. It's a good message. Okay. So, thank you so much, Stacey, for joining me. And we also have another topic in the works with Stacey because she also studied American Sign Language. So, that will be the topic of a future episode. Be ready if you have any questions or things you want to be mentioned related to sign language. Feel free to message me and maybe we can answer some of those questions.
Sounds good.
I actually tried the game that Stacey mentions in this podcast episode, and I wanted to show you how to play in case you're interested. I think it's going to be my new obsession. So, so we just have to go to the website Metazooa here, metazooa.com. And if we scroll down, we can enter the zoo. And basically, yeah, you just have to start by entering the name of an animal that you want to start with. I'm going to put sloth. I don't know, maybe that's how I'm feeling today. And I guessed sloth. Basically, it tells you what the animal you guessed has in common with the animal that it is. Also, sorry for all the ads. I'll try to minimize. So it basically tells you what the animal that you guessed has in common with the animal that is the mystery animal. So both of these animals at some point are related to the tetrapod group, I guess. A tetrapod is any four-limbed vertebrate animal of the clade Tetrapoda. So tetrapods include all extant and extinct amphibians and amniotes. Okay, so really, I mean, this looks like it could be anything. I have birds, zebras. Maybe I'll try zebra. See if that's closer. Okay, so zebras. It looks like both sloths and zebras are more related than the mystery animals. So those are both eutherias, which are called pan-placentalia, a clade consisting of placentalian mammals. Okay, so maybe I should try something not a mammal, like a seagull. Nope. Seagulls are also kind of more related to the other things I've guessed. They are an amniote, vertebrate animals belonging to the clade Amniota. Okay, terrestrial and semi-aquatic vertebrates. So maybe it's like a frog. Poison frog, we'll see. Okay, this is closer. The Batrachia group. Amphibians, including frogs and salamanders. Okay, I'm gonna guess a salamander. Okay, we're closer. The Caudata are a group of amphibians containing the extant salamanders and all extinct species of amphibians, more closely related to salamanders than to frogs. Okay, I mean, it could be an extinct animal. I'm thinking newt. That's like a type of lizard. Okay, that's also more related. The Salamandroidea are a suborder of salamanders referred to as advanced salamanders. Okay, my only problem is I don't know what else to guess. Like, what other lizards are there? Um, no idea. Like a gecko? Could that be? Okay, that's really weird. If I don't know if you guys are looking at this on YouTube or just listening, but geckos are part of the same Sauria family of animals, much more closely related to seagulls versus salamanders. That's so crazy. So geckos are actually really distant from lizards. Um, oh my God, what's another kind of lizard? I don't know. I mean, when I typed lizard, the only thing that came up was Komodo dragon. That feels like a waste of a guess because, yeah, nothing, not at all related to it. Guys, do you know anything about lizards? I don't know other types of lizards. Um, maybe could it be another type of frog? It seems very solidly lizard related. The Salamandroidea suborder of salamanders. Like, okay, it feels like it has to be a type of salamander. There's like no, I don't remember if I'm gonna get it. There's something with an S that I think is like a type of lizard. I'm just gonna scroll and see if I get any inspiration. I think a skink. No, a skink is more related to a Komodo dragon. Okay. That was kind of niche. I'm impressed that I know what a skink is. It's an Indonesian blue-tongued skink. It's a lizard, but it's more closely related to a Komodo dragon and a gecko and a seagull. Imagine, it's more closely related to a seagull than whatever animal we're guessing. Should I exchange three guesses to reveal a rank? I'm gonna do that. Okay, so it was revealed to me that it's part of the sub-rank of Ambystomatidae, which is a family of salamanders. Okay. But like that doesn't really help me because I don't know what is this? It's kind of giving eel a little bit, but I'm sure that's not related. I think the other day could it be an axolotl? Oh my God, it is an axolotl. I won. Woo! That's awesome. Okay. So axolotls are like a type of, I wasn't gonna guess that because don't, I thought that was kind of a throwaway guess. And I'm a little bit surprised. I just thought that thing looked a little bit like it could be an axolotl. Interesting. The axolotl is a paedomorphic salamander, one that matures without undergoing metamorphosis into the terrestrial adult form. Okay, so if you're gonna play this game, I learned some interesting things. One of which that one thing I learned is that geckos are more closely related to seagulls than to other lizard-like creatures that I would have thought they were related to. Interesting. Okay. So that's how to play the game. There's also a plant version. If you go to the website, there's one where you can do the same thing with plants, which I found insanely hard, also more difficult because there are some, I feel like I have no idea how plants are related to one another, and pretty much, and there are so many plants that are like vegetables that have flowers that are related to each other. So, yeah, it's been a very educational experience, and this game is my new addiction. So.